I stepped out of the wedding hall, feeling the cool night air hit me like a slap in its own right. My fingers gripped the keys to the apartment tightly, the metal biting into my skin. I didn't know where I was going or what I was doing. All I knew was that I couldn't stay there, not with them. Not with the look on David's face, the one that said everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, didn't matter. Not with Rebecca, who was no more than a stranger in a dress, pretending to be part of my family. The parking lot was nearly empty. The distant hum of the reception could still be heard from the hall, but it sounded muffled, like it was happening in a world that had no connection to me. I walked aimlessly, my feet dragging, my heart sinking lower with every step. I didn't know what I was looking for. I only knew that I couldn't go back. A figure stepped out from behind one of the parked cars, and I froze, heart racing. It was the man from the wedding hall, the one who had appeared at the exact moment Rebecca slapped me, the one whose gaze had burned through me with an intensity I couldn't place. He was leaning against the car now, watching me with those same knowing eyes. "You look like you need a drink," he said, his voice low and calm, like he wasn't concerned about the mess I'd just left behind. I didn't say anything at first. I couldn't. I wasn't sure if he was real or if I'd imagined him entirely. But then he straightened, and I saw the faintest trace of a smile tug at his lips, just the hint of a curve that made me think he'd seen more than his fair share of heartache. He walked toward me slowly, and I didn't move, didn't speak. I was too tired to fight, too tired to think. My legs felt like they might give out from under me at any moment. "You should come with me," he said, his hand gesturing toward a sleek black car parked nearby. "I'll take you somewhere where you don't have to be alone right now." There was something in his eyes, something unspoken, that made me hesitate for a moment. But what did I have left? I didn't want to go home, not to that apartment, not to the silence that had once been comforting but now felt suffocating. I nodded, finally, the action coming without any real thought. I didn't care where he was taking me, just that I didn't want to face my son or his wife right now. I didn't want to face anything. The car ride was quiet. He didn't push for conversation, didn't ask me what had happened or why I'd left. And I didn't have the energy to speak, to explain what had just transpired. There was no point in explaining something so far beyond any reasonable explanation. We drove for what felt like an hour, though I couldn't have said where we were going. The streetlights blurred past in a haze, their flickering shadows casting long, ghostly streaks across the darkened pavement. Eventually, we turned onto a quiet street, the kind of place that felt remote and hidden from the world. The car slowed in front of a small, unassuming building that looked like it hadn't seen a fresh coat of paint in years. "This is where we'll stop," he said, pulling into a parking spot. I didn't question him. The man who had walked away from the wedding hall, who had appeared out of nowhere at the perfect moment, now seemed like a ghost, impossible to understand, impossible to ignore. He got out of the car and opened the door for me. I stepped out, my legs still unsteady. "Where are we?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the emotions that had built up in my throat. "A place where people go when they need to think," he replied, his voice distant, almost as though he was answering a question no one had asked. He led me inside. The interior was dimly lit, with dark wood paneling and the faint smell of old leather and cigars. A few people sat at the bar chatting in hushed tones, but no one seemed to notice us as we made our way to a small table in the back. The man sat across from me, leaning back in his chair, studying me carefully. "Do you know who I am?" he asked, his gaze never leaving mine. I shook my head. I didn't even know why he'd come to my rescue, why he'd shown up when I needed someone the most. He seemed so out of place, and yet, in some strange way, he fit perfectly into this moment. I didn't feel like asking questions, but his presence was a quiet comfort, something I didn't realize I'd needed. "No," I said simply, "I don't." "I'm someone who's seen enough," he replied cryptically. "Enough betrayal, enough heartbreak, enough of the world turning its back on the people who've given everything. I'm here because I know what it feels like to have the rug pulled out from under you." I glanced at him, trying to piece together what he was telling me. His face was older, weathered with years of experience, but his eyes, they were sharp, cutting through me with an understanding that made my heart ache. He wasn't someone who had just stumbled into this moment by accident. He knew pain. "Why me?" I asked, my voice shaky. "Why did you show up? What do you want from me?" His smile was small, but it wasn't unkind. "I don't want anything from you. I'm just here because sometimes people need a reminder. They need to know they're not as alone as they think." I didn't understand. Not fully. But it didn't matter. The fact that he was here was enough. Enough to make me feel a flicker of something other than the empty ache that had settled in my chest. A waitress came over and placed a drink in front of me. I didn't know what it was, but it was strong. I took a sip, the burn in my throat grounding me, bringing me back to the present. My mind was still foggy, but I couldn't stop thinking about the slap, about Rebecca's eyes, full of rage, about David, whose gaze had never wavered, whose words had been so cold. "You'll be all right," the man said, his voice low. "This isn't the end, not unless you let it be." I looked at him, confused. "How can you say that? You don't know what I've lost. You don't know what it's like to have your own son turn on you." "I know more than you think," he said, his eyes darkening. "I've seen it before. Family doesn't always stick together the way we want them to, but it doesn't mean it's the end of everything." I swallowed, trying to make sense of his words. Everything felt like it was falling apart. My life, my family, everything I'd worked for, everything I thought I understood. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. The man studied me for a long moment. "You live. That's all anyone can do. You live, and you find your way through it. It might take time, but you will find your way." I didn't respond. I couldn't. His words hung in the air like smoke, lingering in the silence between us. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel entirely alone. While you're here, don't forget to subscribe and support this channel with a like. And tell us below, have you ever faced something like this? 3 days later, sitting in my apartment with a whiskey I couldn't afford, I got the phone call. "Mr. Thompson?" The voice was smooth, professional. "We need to talk about your son." "Who is this?" "A concerned party. David and Rebecca are in trouble, more than they realize." I sat up straighter. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind that ruins lives. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m., the coffee shop on Elm Street." "Why should I trust you?" "Because I'm the man who stood in the doorway at the wedding, and because I know things about your family that you don't." He hung up. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at my kitchen table, looking at old photographs. David as a child, gap-toothed and grinning. David at his high school graduation. David on his first day at his fancy business school, courtesy of my second mortgage. When had I lost him? When had he become this stranger who looked at me with contempt? The knock came at midnight. I wasn't expecting it. When I opened the door, the man from the wedding stood there, holding a manila envelope. "You couldn't wait until tomorrow?" I asked. "No." He stepped inside without invitation, moving with the easy confidence of someone used to being in charge. "Things are moving faster than I anticipated." "Who the hell are you?" "James Porter. I'm a consultant. I help people with problems." "I don't have any money." "I'm not asking for money." He handed me the envelope. "I'm asking you to look at what's inside." I opened it. Inside were photographs. David at a restaurant with a woman who wasn't Rebecca. Rebecca at a lawyer's office. Bank statements showing large transfers. Documents I couldn't quite understand, but made my stomach sink. What am I looking at? "Your son and his wife are planning to have you declared incompetent. They've been building a case for months. Once they have control of your affairs, they'll force you into a care facility and sell your apartment. The room tilted. That's insane. I'm 56 years old. I'm perfectly healthy. Doesn't matter. They have a doctor willing to testify. They have witnesses who'll say you're forgetful, unstable. By the time you realize what's happening, it'll be too late. Why are you telling me this? Porter studied me for a long moment. Because I don't like bullies, and because I think you're capable of more than you realize. He moved toward the door, then paused. The coffee shop tomorrow, 2 p.m. Don't be late. After he left, I spread the documents across my table and started reading. Porter slid the envelope across the table toward me. I hesitated before reaching for it, my fingers feeling cold as they brushed the paper. The documents inside were printed with neat, professional type, each page filled with figures, notes, and memos that looked official but didn't make much sense to me at first glance. I glanced up at Porter, whose face remained as unreadable as ever. Your son's empire isn't built on solid ground, he said, leaning back in his chair. He's been cutting corners for years, but he's been careful about it. Just enough to keep his investors happy. Just enough to make the money flow. But people like David, people with ambition and no real understanding of the consequences, they tend to think they're invincible. They're wrong. I flipped through the documents slowly. There were spreadsheets, financial statements, and email exchanges that all pointed to one thing. David had been skimming, inflating, lying. Nothing blatant enough to raise alarms, but enough to tarnish his reputation if anyone found out. I'm not a businessman, Porter. I don't know what I'm looking at, I said, feeling out of my depth. Porter smiled, that same thin, calculating smile. You don't need to understand it all. You just need to know how to use it. And you've got something David doesn't have. Experience. You've lived through betrayal, through hardship. You know how people think, how they react when their backs are against the wall. I set the envelope down on the table, my mind racing. You're asking me to do something I'm not sure I can. What do you mean by teach him a lesson? What are you really asking me to do here? Porter's eyes narrowed slightly. I'm asking you to make him feel what it's like to lose everything. The way you've lost. The way people like Rebecca and her father make others lose. You don't have to ruin his life, but you can show him just how quickly things can slip through his fingers. I took a deep breath, the weight of the choice pressing down on me. I'd spent the last 2 decades of my life working hard for everything I had. My apartment, my business, my son. I'd given him everything. And now, here he was, with his wife by his side, trying to take it all from me. And for what? So they could play a little power game? I don't know if I can go that far, I said, my voice quieter than I intended. Porter leaned forward, his gaze intense. You won't be going that far. I'm not asking you to destroy him. I'm asking you to make him see the price of his arrogance, to make him understand what happens when you take advantage of people. He's got a lot of people fooled, but not everyone. Not you. I stared at the papers again, the numbers and facts swimming in front of my eyes. There were emails with David's name on them, messages from investors talking about the unusual accounting practices, hints at deals that didn't quite add up. If I wanted to, I could leak these to the right people. I could watch his reputation crumble, his investors panic. I could make his world unravel the same way mine had in the blink of an eye. The thought was tempting. More tempting than I wanted to admit. But then I remembered that slap, the sting still fresh on my cheek, the look in David's eyes, the way he'd turned away from me, as if I were nothing. He wasn't just doing this to me. He was doing this to everyone who had ever believed in him, to everyone who had ever trusted him. I felt the fire of anger surge inside me again, the same fire that had fueled me all those years of working long hours, of sacrificing everything so that David would have a better life. He didn't get to take that from me. He didn't get to treat me like this, not after everything I'd given him. I want to hurt him, Porter, I said, my voice hard now, cold even. I want him to feel what it's like to be on the other side of this. But I won't destroy him. That's not who I am. Porter nodded, his face unreadable. That's all I'm asking for. A lesson, a wake-up call, something that will make him stop and think before he does something else that might ruin him. He needs to understand that actions have consequences. I sat back in my chair, my hands clenched tightly on the table, the coffee long forgotten. My mind raced with possibilities. I could take those documents and send them to the right people, the media, his investors, maybe even the authorities, if I wanted to make sure his life came apart at the seams. But I knew I wasn't like that. But there was something else I could do, something that would send a message, loud and clear, without completely ruining him. I looked up at Porter, who was watching me with that calculating expression. "I've got an idea," I said slowly. Porter's eyebrows raised slightly, a spark of interest in his eyes. "I'm listening. I won't go public with this. I won't destroy his business. But I can make it clear to him that the people around him aren't as easily manipulated as he thinks. I can expose him for what he really is. I'll make sure he knows that everything he's built is built on a lie, that nothing he has is really his." Porter's smile deepened, his approval clear in his eyes. That's the spirit. I felt a grim satisfaction settle over me. I wasn't going to burn David's world to the ground, but I was going to make sure he knew that there were consequences for his actions. I was going to make him face the truth, even if it meant taking a long, hard look in the mirror. "How do we start?" I asked, my voice steady now, the resolve in me growing. Porter slid a phone across the table. "You'll start by contacting the people who need to know. We've got a few pieces in place already. You just have to make the right call at the right time." I picked up the phone, feeling the weight of what I was about to do. It wasn't the way I had imagined things going. I never thought I'd find myself in this position. But here I was, and there was no going back. "Let's do it," I said, my voice low. Porter nodded, his eyes gleaming with satisfaction. "You've made the right choice. Let's remind your son who's really in control here." And just like that, the decision was made. There was no turning back now. The plan was simple, elegant, and brutal. David's company, a consulting firm that specialized in helping tech startups optimize their operations, relied entirely on trust. His clients were young entrepreneurs with more money than sense, desperate for guidance. David sold them that guidance with a smile and a handshake. But Porter had discovered something interesting. David had been recommending the same vendors to every client, vendors who kicked back 20% of every contract. Nothing technically illegal, but deeply unethical. If his clients knew, they'd abandon him in droves. "We leak it slowly," Porter explained over the next few days. "A rumor here, a question there. We plant seeds of doubt. That could take months. Good things take time." Porter smiled. "Besides, we have other angles to work." Rebecca was the easier target. She'd built her social media presence on being the perfect wife, the successful young entrepreneur, the woman who had it all. 50,000 followers hung on her every post about boutique shopping and charity galas. But Porter had found her secret. Before marrying David, she'd been engaged to someone else, someone who'd ended up bankrupt and broken after she'd stolen his business contacts and client list. The ex-fiancé had never pressed charges, too humiliated to fight back. "We find him," Porter said. "We convince him to talk." Why would he? Because some wounds never heal, and because we'll make it worth his while. I spent the next week in a strange kind of limbo. By day I worked at the garage, fixing cars and trying to act normal. By night, I met with Porter, learning about my son's secret life, the affairs, the lies, the casual cruelty toward people he considered beneath him. Each revelation hurt, but it also hardened something inside me. I stared at the folder, my fingers grazing over the edge of the check. $20,000. It was a lot of money, too much money, especially for something that didn't feel right. Yet here I was, holding it, knowing exactly what it was for. "Why does Tom Bradley matter?" I asked, my voice low. Porter's gaze was steady, unwavering. "He was the one Rebecca left before she married David. He's got a story to tell, and that story's going to make David question everything. It's one more crack in his perfect little world." I thought about that. David, standing there at the wedding with that same look of arrogance he wore every time things went his way, as if nothing could touch him. The truth was, everything had been built on lies. David wasn't the golden child he thought he was. He was just like the rest of us, flawed, selfish, and now, vulnerable. "I'm supposed to convince him to talk?" I said, more to myself than to Porter. And why would he? What's in it for him? "Money's a good motivator," Porter said simply. "He wants to make sure David pays for what he did to him, and if you can convince him the payoff's worth it, he'll talk. All you need is to meet him, ask the right questions, and show him how he can make things right for himself." I exhaled, rubbing my temples. The weight of the situation was starting to sink in deeper. This wasn't just some game. This wasn't just me fighting back against David and Rebecca. It was about stripping away everything he'd worked for, everything he'd built, and showing him just how fragile it all was. The thought made me sick, but at the same time, there was something undeniably satisfying about it. "I'll do it," I said, nodding slowly. "I'll meet him tomorrow." Porter's expression softened, almost approving. "Good. Just remember, the goal here isn't to break him completely. It's to show him that trust is earned, not taken. That even the people closest to him aren't immune to the consequences of his lies. You understand?" "Yeah, I understand." I stood up from the chair, pocketing the check. "I'll handle it." The rest of the evening dragged on in a blur. I didn't want to go home, not yet. I wasn't sure what I was feeling anymore. Rage, guilt, the unfamiliar sensation of taking control back from someone who had always been one step ahead of me. I'd raised David, done everything for him, and now it seemed he was so far removed from me, from everything I thought he stood for. I couldn't even recognize him anymore. When my shift ended at the garage, I gathered my tools slowly, wiping down the workbench, trying to clear my mind. It wasn't working. The bitterness of the slap, the feeling of betrayal that had burned deep into my chest, it was still there, still raw. I was no longer just a mechanic. I was a man with something to prove. And the next morning, I drove out of town, heading to the state where Tom Bradley lived. The drive was long, and my thoughts kept drifting back to Porter's plan. It seemed so simple, so easy to follow through on, but I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that I was being pulled into something darker. What was the real cost of this? What was I willing to lose? Tom Bradley's name had been one of the things I'd found in the stack of papers Porter gave me. He was Rebecca's ex-fiancé, someone David likely hadn't thought about in years. The details were sparse, just the bare bones. But according to Porter, he was a key piece in this puzzle, the man who had been thrown away for a younger, more polished version of the life Rebecca had always wanted. If he had any animosity toward David, it could be a valuable weapon. I arrived at a small diner at the edge of town, a place where the local patrons had probably seen every face in town 100 times over. It felt like a safe place for a conversation no one would overhear. Tom Bradley was already inside, sitting in a booth near the back. He was hard to miss, tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of rugged charm that didn't try to impress anyone but still had an undeniable presence. When I approached, his eyes scanned me quickly before he gave a short nod, gesturing to the seat across from him. "You must be David's dad," he said with a half grin, his voice deep but laced with something I couldn't quite place. "Didn't expect to see you here." I sat down slowly, setting the folder with the check on the table between us. He didn't look at it right away, but his eyes flicked to it once before focusing back on me. "I'm not here for small talk, Tom," I said, cutting straight to the point. "I've got a proposition for you." His eyebrows raised slightly, but he didn't speak. Just waited, like he already knew this wasn't going to be an easy conversation. "I know about you and Rebecca," I continued, "and I know why you're not with her anymore. But I also know she's hurt you, and now she's with my son. The same son who's lying to the people around him, taking advantage of them. I've got something that could make it all right for you. Something that'll hurt David the way he deserves to be hurt. You in?" Tom studied me for a long moment, his gaze calculating. I could see the wheels turning in his head, but he didn't seem the least bit intimidated. "You want me to take down your son?" he asked quietly. "Why should I do that?" "Because David's a liar," I said, leaning in. "And he's been lying to everyone around him. To you, to me, to Rebecca. He's built everything on false pretenses, and people like him, they don't think there are any consequences. But there are, you know that." Tom finally looked down at the folder, the glint of interest finally creeping into his eyes. He opened it, scanning the documents quickly. His expression didn't change, but there was something about the way his fingers grazed the check that told me he was already considering his options. "What do you want me to do with this?" Tom asked. "You tell your side of the story. You make it clear to everyone that Rebecca isn't some innocent victim, that she's been playing games with people for years. You make sure David knows that the people he's hurt are still out there, that they're not going to just forget." Tom picked up the check, examining it before looking back at me. "This isn't about money, is it?" "It's about getting even," I said. "About showing him that nothing he has is as safe as he thinks." He didn't respond right away, just kept staring at the check. Then he finally nodded, a slight grin creeping onto his face. "All right, old man," he said, his voice low. "You've got a deal." I felt a flicker of satisfaction, but it was quickly replaced by the unease that had been settling in my stomach all morning. This wasn't the end game. This was just the beginning. David wouldn't know what hit him. Tom Bradley was younger than I expected, maybe 35, with tired eyes and a defeated posture. We met at a diner halfway between our towns. "Mr. Thompson," he said, shaking my hand weakly, "I'm not sure why I'm here. Because Rebecca is my daughter-in-law, and because I think she did to my son what she did to you." Tom's jaw tightened. "What did she tell you?" "Nothing. But I've done my research. I know she took your contacts, your client list. I know she left you with nothing. It was more than that." Tom stared at his coffee. "She made me trust her, love her. Then she used that trust to destroy me. By the time I realized what was happening, I'd lost everything. My business, my reputation, my self-respect. I'm sorry. Are you? Or are you just here to use me like everyone else?" I put the check on the table. 10,000 now, 10,000 more if you're willing to tell your story publicly. Tom looked at the check, then at me. "Why?" "Because she slapped me at my son's wedding. Because she's trying to take my home. Because I'm tired of bullies winning." "And you think exposing her will stop her?" "I think it'll hurt her. That's enough for now." Tom picked up the check, studied it, then folded it carefully. "What do you need me to do?" Over the next hour, I learned the full story. Rebecca had been Tom's assistant. She'd been charming, helpful, eager to learn. Tom had fallen for her completely. They'd gotten engaged. She'd asked to help with the business, claiming she wanted to understand his world. He'd given her access to everything. 6 months later, she left him for David. Took the client list with her. Started her own consulting business using Tom's contacts. By the time Tom realized what happened, she'd already established relationships with his best clients. When he tried to fight back, she'd threatened to accuse him of harassment. "I had no proof," Tom said. "No way to fight her without destroying myself in the process. So I walked away." "I have proof now," I said. "Emails, documents, testimony from people who saw what happened. If you're willing to go public, we can make sure everyone knows what kind of person she really is." Tom was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. "Okay, let's do it." Rebecca's world began crumbling on a Tuesday. Tom's story appeared on a business blog that specialized in exposing fraud and unethical practices. It was detailed, specific, and devastating. Within hours, it had been shared thousands of times. By evening, mainstream news sites were picking it up. Rebecca's social media accounts exploded. Her carefully curated image as a successful entrepreneur shattered. People who'd worked with her started coming forward with their own stories. A pattern emerged of manipulation, theft, and ruthless ambition. David called me that night, frantic. "Did you do this?" "Do what?" "Don't play stupid, Dad. Tom Bradley. That article. You were seen with him." "I had coffee with someone. Is that a crime?" "This is destroying Rebecca. Her sponsors are dropping her. Her clients are leaving. Maybe she shouldn't have built her career on lies. She made one mistake years ago. She was young. She's changed." "Has she? Because from where I'm standing, she's still the same person who slapped me at your wedding." David's voice dropped. "If you don't stop this, I'll never speak to you again." "Then I guess we have nothing more to say." I hung up and immediately felt sick. But Porter's words echoed in my mind. They need to understand there are consequences, that they can't just take what they want without paying a price. The next phase was harder. David's business problems had intensified. His remaining clients were questioning everything. His vendors were distancing themselves. The rumors about kickbacks had spread like wildfire. But we weren't done. Porter had one more card to play. The affair had started 6 months before the wedding. Her name was Jennifer, a marketing consultant David had hired. Porter had found her through credit card receipts, hotel records, and 100 small clues David thought he'd hidden. "She doesn't know about Rebecca," Porter said. "David told her he was single. She thinks they have a future together. And you want me to tell her the truth. I want you to give her proof. Let her decide what to do with it." Jennifer lived in the city, 40 minutes away. I drove there on a Saturday morning feeling like the worst kind of person. But I kept thinking about the slap, about David's contempt, about the way they'd planned to steal my home and lock me away. Jennifer was pretty, mid-30s, with kind eyes that reminded me of my ex-wife before everything went bad. She invited me into her apartment, confused but polite. "Mr. Thompson? David's father?" "Yes. I'm sorry to bother you, but there's something you need to know." I showed her everything. The wedding photos, the marriage certificate, David and Rebecca's social media posts about their perfect life together. Jennifer's face went pale. "No, that's not possible. David said he was divorced. He said—" "He lied. I'm sorry." She sat down hard on her couch. 6 months. We've been together for 6 months. I know, and I know this isn't fair to you, but you deserve to know the truth. Why are you telling me this? Why now? I could have lied. Could have said it was about doing the right thing. But I was tired of lies, because David and his wife are trying to take everything from me, and because I want them to understand what it feels like to lose something they care about. Jennifer looked at me with something like respect. That's honest, at least. What will you do? She stood up, her shock hardening into anger. I'm going to make sure Rebecca knows exactly what her husband's been doing, and then I'm going to make sure everyone in their social circle knows too. The explosion happened at a charity gala Rebecca was hosting. Jennifer showed up uninvited, walked right up to David at the bar, and kissed him in front of everyone. Then she turned to Rebecca and said, loudly enough for half the room to hear, "I'm so sorry. I didn't know he was married." The room went silent. Then the whispers started. Phones came out. Within minutes, it was all over social media. Rebecca's carefully constructed world collapsed completely. Her sponsors didn't just leave, they demanded refunds. Her business partners cut ties. The influencer contracts she'd spent years building evaporated overnight. David's business followed. His last major clients abandoned him. His office lease was canceled. His business partners voted him out of the company he'd founded. I watched it all from a distance, through Porter's updates and social media posts and the occasional news article. Part of me felt vindicated, but a larger part felt hollow. "This is what you wanted," Porter said when we met for what I knew would be the last time. "Is it?" "You wanted them to understand. To feel what you felt. Mission accomplished. They're destroyed. They destroyed themselves. You just accelerated the process." Porter handed me one more envelope. "This is yours now." Inside were documents transferring David's apartment building investment to my name. How? He used it as collateral for a loan he couldn't repay. I bought the debt. Consider it payment for my services. I didn't ask for this. No, but you earned it. Your son tried to take your home. Now you own his. Porter stood. What you do with it is up to you. He left. I never saw him again. David showed up at my apartment 3 weeks later. He looked terrible, unshaven, wearing old clothes with dark circles under his eyes. For a moment, I saw the boy he used to be. The son I'd loved before everything went wrong. "Dad," he said, "can I come in?" I stepped aside. He looked around my apartment like he was seeing it for the first time. The worn furniture, the clean but dated kitchen, the photographs on the walls of a life he'd rejected. "Rebecca left me," he said. "She's living with her parents. Won't answer my calls." "I'm sorry." "Are you?" He turned to me. "This was all you, wasn't it? Tom Bradley, Jennifer, everything." I could have denied it, but I was done with lies. "Yes." David's face crumpled. "Why? I'm your son. You slapped me, or you let your wife slap me, which is the same thing. You planned to take my home and lock me away. You called me a loser in front of everyone." I was angry, stressed. Rebecca was in my ear about the apartment, about how we needed a bigger place. "So you decided to steal mine." I didn't think of it that way. I just thought, you didn't need that much space. You were alone. We were starting a family. On my back, using what I'd built. David sat down on my couch, his head in his hands. "I lost everything, Dad. My business, my marriage, my reputation. I'm staying with a friend. I have nothing." I sat across from him, feeling that hollow ache again. "Good." He looked up, shocked. "You needed to lose everything," I continued, "because you'd forgotten what it took to build something. You'd forgotten that nothing worth having comes easy. You'd forgotten where you came from. So this was a lesson? You destroyed my life to teach me a lesson?" "I destroyed your lie. The life you had was built on manipulation and shortcuts and stepping on people you thought didn't matter. That wasn't real. And now what? You expect me to thank you?" "No. I expect you to figure out who you really are, without the money, without the fancy title, without Rebecca telling you what to think." David stood up. "I can't believe you did this. You're my father. And you're my son. That's why I didn't let you get away with it." He walked to the door, then paused. "Did you ever love me?" The question hit like a punch. "Every single day of your life. That's why this hurts so much." David left without another word. Rebecca came a week later. She was different from David, colder, more calculating. She stood in my doorway in designer clothes I knew she couldn't afford anymore, her face perfectly made up despite everything. "You must be very proud of yourself," she said. "Not particularly. My father has lawyers looking into this. They'll prove you conspired to destroy my reputation. Good luck with that." She smiled, but there was nothing warm in it. "You think you won, but you didn't. You're still a lonely old man in a cheap apartment. David and I will rebuild. We always do. Maybe. But you'll do it knowing that actions have consequences. That you can't just take what you want without paying a price. All this because I slapped you? How pathetically fragile. No. All this because you tried to steal my home. The slap was just the beginning. Rebecca's smile faded. David was right about you. You are a loser. A bitter, petty loser who couldn't stand seeing his son succeed. If that's what you need to believe. She turned to leave, then looked back. You know what the saddest part is? David actually loved you. Before all this, he talked about you sometimes, about how hard you worked, how much you sacrificed. He respected you, in his way, but you couldn't leave well enough alone. He showed that love by planning to have me declared incompetent. That was my idea. He went along with it, but his heart was never in it. He just wanted to please me. She laughed bitterly. You destroyed your relationship with your son over something that might never have happened. After she left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time, thinking about what she'd said. Was she right? Had I overreacted? Destroyed something that could have been saved? I looked at the photographs on my wall. David at 10, grinning with a missing tooth. David at 16, awkward and earnest. David at 25, already starting to change into someone I didn't recognize. No, I'd done the right thing. They needed to learn, even if it cost me everything. 6 months passed. I didn't hear from David. Rebecca's social media account stayed quiet. According to Porter's occasional updates before he'd disappeared, they were both working regular jobs. David in sales, Rebecca as a personal assistant. My life returned to normal, or something close to it. I worked at the garage. I had dinner with old friends. I managed the apartment building I now owned, trying to be a better landlord than I'd had when I was younger. But something had changed inside me. The anger that had sustained me through the revenge was gone, replaced by a kind of emptiness. I'd won, but it didn't feel like victory. Then one evening, I got a phone call. Mr. Thompson? A woman's voice, vaguely familiar. Yes? This is Jennifer. We met a few months ago. I remember. I'm calling about David. He listed you as an emergency contact at his job, and there's been an accident. What kind of accident? He collapsed at work. They took him to St. Mary's Hospital. He's stable, but he's asking for you. I drove to the hospital in a daze, my mind racing. This was it. The moment of truth. Would I go to him? After everything that had happened? Of course I would. He was my son. David looked small in the hospital bed, smaller than I remembered. The machines beeped steadily, and an IV drip fed into his arm. Hey, Dad, he said weakly. What happened? Panic attack. At least, that's what they think. My heart started racing. I couldn't breathe. He laughed without humor. Turns out it was just stress. Just stress. Yeah. Turns out losing everything is hard on your health. Who knew? I sat in the chair next to his bed. Rebecca called this in? No. Jennifer did. She's been checking on me, making sure I'm eating, not drinking too much. She's a good person. Better than I deserve. Probably true. David smiled slightly. I've been thinking a lot. About what you said. About building a real life instead of a fake one. And you were right. Everything I had before was built on lies. Rebecca's lies. My lies. I convinced myself it was okay because everyone did it. Because that's how you got ahead. But it wasn't real. So what now? Now I start over. For real this time. I got a job at a marketing firm. Entry level. The pay is terrible, but the work is honest. I'm learning what it actually takes to build something from the ground up. I nodded. That's good. I'm also going to therapy, trying to figure out why I became such an asshole. He looked at me. I'm sorry, Dad, for all of it. The wedding, the apartment scheme, calling you a loser, all of it. The words I'd wanted to hear for months. But now that I'd heard them, they felt inadequate, like they couldn't bridge the distance between us. I'm sorry too, I said, for what I did. It was cruel. It was necessary. I needed to hit bottom to understand what really matters. He paused. Jennifer told me what you said to her, about wanting me to understand what it feels like to lose something. I get it now. Do you? Yeah, I lost everything. My business, my marriage, my pride. But you know what I didn't lose? You. You're still here. That's more than I deserve. I felt something crack inside me. You're my son, David. I'll always be here. Even after everything? Especially after everything. We sat in silence for a while, the machines beeping steadily. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was a start. Rebecca came by the apartment one last time, 3 months later. She looked different. No designer clothes, no perfect makeup. Just a woman in jeans and a sweater, looking tired but somehow more real. I'm moving, she said. California. Fresh start. Good for you. I wanted to apologize, for the slap, for trying to take your apartment, for everything. I studied her face, looking for the manipulation I'd always seen there. But it wasn't there anymore. She just looked exhausted. Okay, I said. That's it? Okay? What do you want me to say, Rebecca? That I forgive you? That everything's fine now? I guess I wanted something. Closure, maybe. Closure is overrated. Sometimes things just end. She nodded slowly. David and I signed the divorce papers last week. It's final now. I heard. He's doing better. Jennifer's good for him. She keeps him grounded. Rebecca smiled sadly. I never did that. I just pushed him to want more. Be more. Never satisfied. That's honest. I learned from you. That honesty matters more than image. She turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, I understand why you did it. Why you destroyed us. If someone tried to take my home, I'd probably do worse. Probably. Maybe in another life, we could have been friends. Or at least not enemies. Maybe. After she left, I stood at my window, looking out at the street below. People walking, living their lives, moving forward. I thought about Porter, wherever he was, about the choice he'd given me, fight or surrender. I'd chosen to fight, and I'd won. But the victory felt different than I'd imagined. Not triumphant, just complete. A year after the wedding, David came over for dinner. It had become a regular thing. Every Sunday, he'd show up with groceries and we'd cook together. Talk about work, about life, about everything except what had happened. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, he brought Jennifer. Dad, you remember Jennifer? Of course. Come in. She smiled nervously. Thank you for having me. We cooked pasta, nothing fancy. David and I worked together like we used to when he was young, moving around the kitchen with practiced ease. Jennifer helped, asking questions, laughing at our stories. It felt normal, like family. Over dinner, David cleared his throat. Dad, we have something to tell you. I braced myself. Jennifer and I are getting married. Next spring, small ceremony, just close friends and family. He looked at me. We'd like you to be there. I looked at Jennifer, then at David, at the way they sat close together, the way they looked at each other. This was different from Rebecca. This was real. I'd be honored, I said. Jennifer smiled. There's something else. We've been looking at houses. There's one we love, but we're short on the down payment. We were wondering if... No, David interrupted. That's not what we're asking. We're not asking for money. Then what? We're asking for advice. You built something from nothing. You know what real work looks like. We want to learn from you. Do it the right way this time. I sat back, surprised. The right way is hard, takes time, means saying no to shortcuts. We know, David said. We're ready for hard. I looked at my son, at the man he was becoming. Not perfect, but honest, real, learning. Okay, I said, I'll teach you what I know. We talked for hours that night, about budgets and planning, about building equity slowly, about the difference between what you want and what you need. Basic things David should have learned years ago, but had been too busy chasing success to notice. When they left, David hugged me. A real hug, the first in years. Thank you, Dad, for everything. For destroying your life. For caring enough to stop me from destroying it myself. I saw Rebecca one more time, 2 years after the wedding. I was at a coffee shop in the city, meeting with a contractor about repairs on the building. She walked in, and for a moment, we just stared at each other. She'd changed again, looked healthier, happier. She was with a man I didn't recognize, someone closer to her age, dressed casually. She walked over. Hello, Mr. Thompson. Rebecca, how are you? Good. Really good, actually. She gestured to the man. This is Andrew. We work together at a nonprofit. Youth mentorship. Nice to meet you, Andrew said, shaking my hand. Rebecca smiled. Turns out I'm good at helping people. Who knew? I'm glad you found something meaningful. I heard about David and Jennifer's wedding. It sounded beautiful. It was. Small, but real. That's David's style now, I guess. Real. She paused. Look, I know I said this before, but I need to say it again. I'm sorry. For everything. I was young and stupid and greedy, and I hurt people. I hurt you. I know. But I'm different now. Better. I'm doing the work. Therapy. Making amends. Trying to be someone I can respect. I studied her face. She meant it. Good. That's good, Rebecca. Would you tell David I'm happy for him, and that I'm sorry? You could tell him yourself. No? That wouldn't be fair to Jennifer. But maybe someday. She smiled. Thank you for the lesson, Mr. Thompson, even if it was brutal. You're welcome. After she left, I sat with my coffee, thinking about the strange turns life takes, the way people change, the way revenge, even justified revenge, ripples out in unexpected ways. Had I done the right thing? I still wasn't sure. But David was happy, building a real life, learning what mattered. Maybe that was enough. 5 years after the wedding, David's daughter was born. I held her in the hospital, this tiny person who was my granddaughter, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Pure, uncomplicated joy. Her name is Sarah, Jennifer said, after my grandmother. It's beautiful, I said. David stood next to me, looking down at his daughter with wonder. I can't believe she's real, that I'm responsible for her. Welcome to fatherhood. How did you do it, Dad? Raise a kid alone? One day at a time, made a lot of mistakes, did the best I could. Did you ever regret it, having me? I looked at him, at the man he'd become, flawed but honest, working hard, trying to be better. Not once, I said. Later, when Jennifer was sleeping and the baby was in her bassinet, David and I talked. I think about the wedding sometimes, he said, about how close I came to losing everything that mattered. We all make mistakes. But mine were spectacular. If you hadn't stopped me, I don't know where I'd be now. Probably still married to Rebecca, still chasing money, still empty. You would have figured it out eventually. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to learn the hard way for decades. Just a few brutal months. He smiled, though it felt like decades at the time. I bet. I want you to meet someone, David said. Tom Bradley. He's been mentoring me, teaching me about real business ethics. We've become friends. That's good. He told me what you did, the money, convincing him to speak up. He said you gave him his dignity back. David looked at me. You gave me mine too, even though I had to lose everything first to find it. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm naming you Sarah's guardian, David continued. In the will, if anything happens to Jennifer and me, I want you to raise her. David, I'm 61 years old. So? You raised me. You know what matters. Money, status, none of that garbage. Just love and discipline and showing up every day. He put his hand on my shoulder. "You're the best man I know, Dad. I want my daughter to learn from you." I looked through the window at the tiny person sleeping in her bassinet. "Okay," I said, "but nothing's going to happen to you two." "I know, but it helps, knowing she'd be okay." We sat in comfortable silence, watching Jennifer sleep, watching the baby breathe. This was what mattered. Not revenge, not teaching lessons. Just this. Family. Real and imperfect, and enough. The building I'd taken from David became something more than just property. I converted the ground floor into a community space, a place where young people could learn trades, mechanics, carpentry, plumbing, real skills that couldn't be outsourced or automated away. David helped run it. So did Tom. They taught business classes, ethics, how to build something that lasted. Jennifer volunteered too, teaching marketing and communication. The real kind, not the manipulative social media garbage Rebecca had specialized in. We called it Second Chances. The name was Tom's idea. He understood better than anyone what it meant to rebuild from nothing, to take the broken pieces of your life and make something new. We got our first success story a year after opening. A kid named Miguel, 19, high school dropout. He came in angry and suspicious, but he stayed, learned mechanics, got good at it, started his own mobile repair business. At the 1-year anniversary, he stood up in front of everyone and talked about what the program meant to him. "My whole life people told me I was nothing," he said. "But Mr. Thompson gave me a chance. Taught me that my hands could build things instead of breaking them, that I could be someone." I watched from the back, feeling that crack inside me widen, but it wasn't breaking. It was healing, letting in light. David found me after. "You did this, Dad, this whole thing, it's incredible." "We did it, all of us." "No, you started it. You took something meant for revenge and turned it into something good." Maybe he was right. Maybe that was the real lesson. That destruction wasn't the end. That from ashes, you could build something better than what came before. My ex-wife showed up one afternoon, 7 years after the wedding. Linda. I hadn't seen her in over a decade. She looked older, but then so did I. She stood at the door of the community center, looking uncertain. "Hello, James," she said. "Linda, what are you doing here?" "David told me about this place, about what you've done. I wanted to see it." I gave her a tour, showed her the workshop, the classrooms, the kids learning and laughing and building things with their hands. She didn't say much, just watched with something like wonder on her face. Afterward, we sat in my office. The silence stretched. "I heard about the wedding," she finally said. "About what David and Rebecca tried to do. Ancient history." "Is it? David told me what you did, how you destroyed their lives, then helped them rebuild." She looked at me. "That's very you. Brutal and kind at the same time. I just did what needed doing. I left because I thought you were weak," Linda said suddenly. "Because you worked too much and didn't make enough money and were too nice to people who didn't deserve it. I wanted more. Better. So I left you and David." "I know. But I was wrong. You weren't weak. You were strong in ways I couldn't see, and I missed everything. David growing up, him making mistakes, learning, all of it." Her voice broke. "I missed my son because I was chasing something that didn't matter." "Why are you telling me this?" "Because David invited me to Sarah's birthday party, and I don't know if I deserve to go, if I have the right to be part of his life after abandoning him." I thought about grudges and forgiveness and the weight we carry. "Go," I said. "David wants you there. That's what matters." "Will you be there?" "Of course, I'm her grandfather." Linda smiled sadly. "You're a better person than me, James. Always were." "I'm not. I just learned what mattered before you did." Sarah's 3rd birthday party was everything a kid's party should be. Messy, loud, full of laughter. David and Jennifer had rebuilt their lives completely. They owned a small house. Nothing fancy, but theirs. David ran his own consulting firm, small but ethical. Jennifer managed the marketing for Second Chances. They were happy, really happy. Linda came, nervous and quiet. She sat with Sarah for a while, playing with toys, talking softly. Sarah, too young to understand the complicated history, just saw a grandmother who wanted to play. It was enough. Rebecca sent a card, no return address, just a note. Congratulations to Sarah, wishing her every happiness. R. I showed it to David. He read it and nodded. That's good. She's moved on. Have you? Yeah, I think I have. As the party wound down, I found myself in the backyard with Tom. We'd become friends over the years, bonded by our shared experience of betrayal and recovery. You ever regret it? He asked. What you did to David and Rebecca? Sometimes. Late at night, when I'm alone, I wonder if there was another way. But then I see David now, really see him, and I think maybe some people need to lose everything before they can find what matters. Tom nodded. Rebecca reached out to me last year, did I tell you? No. She apologized, really apologized, not the surface stuff. Said she'd been in therapy for 2 years, working on herself. Asked if I could ever forgive her. Could you? I'm trying. Forgiveness is hard, but holding on to hate is harder. He smiled. That's something I learned from you. I'm not sure I've forgiven anyone. Haven't you? You're here, at David's house, celebrating your granddaughter's birthday with your ex-wife and your son who tried to steal your home. That's forgiveness. Maybe not the pretty kind, but the real kind. I thought about that. Maybe he was right. The end came quietly, not with drama but with peace. I was 70 years old, sitting in my apartment, looking at photographs. Sarah was 15 now. Smart, kind, nothing like the people David and Rebecca had been. David had made sure of that. The phone rang. David's number. Hey, Dad. How are you feeling? Good. Tired, but good. Jennifer and I were talking. We want you to move in with us. The house is getting cramped with Sarah getting older, and we're looking at bigger places. Ones with a bedroom on the ground floor for you. I'm fine where I am. Dad, you're 70. You had a heart scare last month. Let us take care of you for once. I thought about refusing, about staying independent until the end. But then I thought about Sarah, about being there for her teenage years, about family. Okay, I said. Really? Really, but I'm paying rent. David laughed. We'll negotiate. 6 months later, I moved into their new house. It had a guest suite on the first floor with its own bathroom, a small garden outside my window, room for all of us. Sarah helped me unpack. Grandpa, are these from when Dad was young? She held up old photographs. David at 10, at 15, at 20. Yeah, your dad was quite the kid. He told me you two didn't talk for a while, after his first wedding. That's true. What happened? I looked at my granddaughter, trying to figure out how much to tell her, how much she could understand. We both made mistakes, I said. He forgot where he came from. I forgot how to forgive. It took us a while to find our way back to each other. But you did. But we did. Sarah smiled. Good. I can't imagine our family without you. Neither could I anymore. Porter showed up one last time when I was 73. I was in the garden, working on tomato plants, when I heard a familiar voice. James Thompson, still alive and kicking. I turned. Porter looked older, grayer, but still sharp. Still dangerous in that quiet way. James Porter. I thought you'd disappeared. I did, for a while, but I keep tabs on my projects. He sat on the garden bench. Wanted to see how things turned out. Why? Professional curiosity. And because I liked you. Wanted to make sure the story had a happy ending. I laughed. Not sure about happy, but it ended okay. Porter looked around at the house, the garden, the sound of Sarah practicing piano inside. This is what you built from the ashes. Not bad. What about you? What have you been doing? Same thing I always do. Helping people who can't help themselves. Balancing scales. Making sure bullies don't always win. You ever regret it? The things you do? Sometimes. But then, I remember why I do them. He stood. You did good, James. Your son's a better man because of what you did. Your granddaughter has a real family. That second chances place is helping hundreds of kids. You took your anger and made something good. I just did what I had to do. That's what makes you different. Most people just want revenge. You wanted justice. There's a difference. He held out his hand. It was an honor knowing you. I shook it. You too. For what it's worth. Porter walked away, and I never saw him again. But his words stayed with me. The difference between revenge and justice. Between destroying and building. Maybe I'd found that line after all. David came into my room one evening holding a book. Sarah's studying family history for school. She wanted me to tell her about the wedding, about what happened between us. What did you tell her? The truth, that I was arrogant and cruel, that you taught me a lesson I needed, that it was the hardest and best thing that ever happened to me. She understood. She's 15. She understands that adults make mistakes, that family is complicated. He sat down. But she asked me something I couldn't answer. She asked if I ever forgave you. I waited. I told her there was nothing to forgive, that you saved my life. But then, she asked if you'd forgiven me. He looked at me. Have you? I thought about the slap, about the apartment scheme, about months of rage and planning and revenge, about watching my son lose everything, about years of slowly rebuilding what we'd broken. Yeah, I said. I forgave you a long time ago. When? The moment you showed up at that hospital, scared and alone and asking for help. That's when I knew you were still my son, still worth fighting for. David's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve you. None of us deserve the grace we're given. We just have to be grateful for it. He hugged me then, and I felt the last piece of that old anger finally dissolve. It had taken over a decade, but we were whole again. Different, but whole. The community center celebrated its 10th anniversary with a huge party. Over 300 kids had come through the program, most of them doing well, building businesses, raising families, contributing. Miguel, our first success story, was now 30 and ran a chain of auto repair shops. He sponsored scholarships for new students. Tom Bradley had retired from his old job to work at the center full-time. Linda, my ex-wife, volunteered in the office, finally finding purpose in helping others. David gave a speech, talked about second chances, about how his father had taught him that failure wasn't final, that you could lose everything and still rebuild if you were willing to work. My dad destroyed my life, he said, and the room went quiet. He exposed my lies, revealed my secrets, made me lose everything I thought mattered, and it was the greatest gift anyone ever gave me, because what I thought mattered didn't, and what actually mattered, I'd forgotten. He looked at me. So this center, these kids, all of this comes from one man who cared enough to teach a hard lesson. My father, James Thompson. The applause was thunderous. I stood, uncomfortable with the attention but grateful for the moment. Sarah came up and hugged me. You're famous, Grandpa. I'm really not. You are to everyone here. You changed lives. Maybe I had, but not the way I'd intended. I'd set out for revenge, for justice, to make my son pay. But somehow, in the wreckage, we'd built something better than what came before. That was the real lesson. Not that revenge was wrong, but that what you did after the revenge mattered more. I died on a Tuesday morning in spring, sitting in my garden. That's what they told me later anyway. I'd been working on the tomato plants when my heart finally gave out. No pain, no warning, just there one moment and gone the next. But that's not how I remember it. I remember sitting in the sun, feeling the warmth on my face, thinking about Sarah's graduation next month, about David's 40th birthday party we were planning, about the new class of kids starting at the center. I remember feeling content. Not happy exactly, but satisfied, like I'd done what I came to do. Then I opened my eyes and I was back in the wedding hall, watching Rebecca's hand rise toward my face, watching David stand behind her, not stopping it, watching 200 guests turn to stare. But this time, when the slap came, I didn't feel rage or hurt. I just felt sad. Sad for the people they were, sad for what they'd become, sad for how close we all came to destroying each other. Then I blinked and I was in the hospital with David, holding his hand while machines beeped, listening to him apologize, watching him break down, seeing him become human again. Another blink. Sarah's birth, her first steps, her first day of school, her telling me she loved me in that straightforward way kids have before they learn to be complicated. The garden again, the sun warm, the tomatoes growing, peace. Someone was shaking me. David's voice, panicked. "Dad? Dad? Can you hear me?" But I couldn't answer. The garden was fading, and I was somewhere else, somewhere quiet and still and complete. I'd done it. I'd taught the lesson. I'd gotten my revenge and turned it into something good. I'd watched my son become a man worth knowing. I'd held my granddaughter and seen her become extraordinary. I'd lived. The rest was just details. Epilogue. That isn't an epilogue. They found me in the garden, David told me later. He'd come home early from work, some instinct telling him to check on me. He'd tried CPR, called 911, done everything right, but I was already gone. The funeral was big, people from the center, Tom Bradley, Linda, Jennifer's family, kids I'd taught, parents I'd helped, a lifetime of connections I hadn't realized I'd made. David spoke, talked about his father who'd been tough and unforgiving and absolutely unwilling to watch the people he loved destroy themselves, who'd cared enough to fight back even when it cost him everything. He taught me that love isn't always soft, David said. Sometimes it's brutal. Sometimes it has to break you to save you. And I'm grateful every single day that he loved me enough to break me. Sarah spoke too. Talked about her grandfather who taught her to build things with her hands, to value people over possessions, to understand that the size of your life wasn't measured in money, but in moments. He told me once that he'd made a lot of mistakes, Sarah said, but his biggest mistake was almost giving up on my dad. He said that's when he learned that destruction without rebuilding is just cruelty, that revenge without redemption is just bitterness, and that family, real family, means fighting for each other, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. They buried me next to my parents, put a simple stone. James Thompson, father, teacher, builder of second chances. But the real memorial was the center, the kids who kept coming, the lives that kept changing, the ripples spreading out from one moment of rage transformed into decades of grace. David runs it now. Sarah volunteers when she's home from college. Tom's still there, teaching ethics and business and the difference between success and significance. Sometimes, on quiet days, David sits in the office and looks at the photograph on the wall. Him and me at Sarah's 10th birthday, both smiling, both whole. "Thank you, Dad," he whispers, "for everything." And somewhere, somehow, I hear him. The revenge that became redemption, the anger that became architecture, the destruction that became creation, a father's revenge, but more than that, a father's love,